It is a sunny Sunday in June, and I am sitting in a Porsche with a man I recently matched with on Bumble, two Spanish sighthounds, an intersex DJ, and Curtis Yarvin. "Let's go Team Fascist," shouts my match as he pulls away from the Grand Georgian Terrace in Pimlico, where Yarvin has spent the morning chatting about Austrian economics with 86-year-old crossbench peer and Keynes biographer Lord Skidelsky. "Hiya, hiya, hiya, hiya." Yarvin laughs loudly, from his nose rather than his belly. Until last November, the 52-year-old computer engineer and blogger was relatively unknown outside of a small group of Silicon Valley libertarians and a segment of the very online right that has been following him since his early writings under the pseudonym Mencius Molebug. But since Donald Trump's re-election, Yarvin's profile has grown exponentially. So has his influence, as his once fringe ideas, dismantling the administrative state, replacing America's democratic system with an authoritarian CEO-in-chief, getting rid of foreign aid, shutting down elite universities, have gone from chatroom theory to something more like reality. Yarvin is considered the godfather of the neo-reactionary movement that rejects egalitarianism and democracy in favor of a return to a monarchical system. He's particularly preoccupied with the conditions that might trigger a revolution to bring about such a transformation. Yarvin is also the person who popularized the idea of the red pill, referencing a scene from the 1999 film The Matrix, as a metaphor for becoming ideologically awake to the way the world really works. Take the red pill and you'll see that, rather than being a true democracy, America is in fact being run by the cathedral, Yarvin's preferred term for an ideological and intellectual complex controlled by the media, academia, the civil service, and other liberal elites. These ideas helped Yarvin forge friendships with billionaire venture capitalist Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, both of whom have also invested in his peer-to-peer networking startup, Urbit. Though Yarvin has never spoken with Trump, many of the president's staffers are known to be avid followers, and he is in contact with Vice President J.D. Vance, with whom Yarvin says he spoke in person about a month ago. Yarvin is only in London for a few days, having flown here for a party he attends every year thrown by Ben Dello, a billionaire philanthropist and co-founder of the BitMEX crypto exchange. In 2022, Dello pleaded guilty to having violated the U.S. Bank Secrecy Act, but was pardoned by Trump this year. The party takes place in the cloisters of Westminster Abbey and is attended by the toast of Britain's right-wing elite. But today we are off to a more discreet gathering, a secret solstice barbecue and picnic at a beautiful, private, 15th century country house and garden in Surrey, arranged in Yarvin's honor. The invite features an AI-generated image of an elegantly laid table in a carefully manicured garden, so I am expecting a high-class affair and have brought along a bottle of Taitinger. The FT lanyard around my neck clashes a little with my attempt at the tradwife aesthetic, a mid-length linen floral dress, but I was warned by my Bumble match that there will probably be some hostility towards me. I thought it best to make it obvious I am a journalist. When we first matched, I hadn't grokked his politics. They only became clear as we began exchanging messages, and he told me about his expectation that his future wife shouldn't work, but do Pilates instead. When he discovered that I write a weekly column, and that I had recently noted the rightward vibe shift, he said he thought that was rather cosmic, given the kind of circles he mixed in, and that maybe the universe wasn't bringing us together for romantic reasons. He also offered me some professional feedback. You're very layer one. You're very scratching the surface. As a remedy, he offered to introduce me to some deeper thinkers, starting with today's party. The intersex DJ is a friend of the party's organizer and will be providing the soundtrack for the day. She was brought up as a boy by her parents, but always felt she was a girl and used to describe herself as trans. But she is now fiercely anti-woke, skeptical of the trans rights movement, and describes herself as based. The Spanish sighthounds, who are rolling around behind us in the spacious boot, belong to my match. So is this what they call the UK with the YLO? Yarvin asks, as we cruise through a suburb of Croydon with a large South Asian population. Hiya, hiya, hiya. I love that. I love that. He's referencing UK aesthetics, a satirical X account that posts images of multicultural Britain. Well, you can certainly get enough fried chicken here and discount carpets, he says, gazing out of the window and turning more somber. It's just so, looking at the legacy of imperial decay, especially for people who have a family tradition of serving the empire. Must be what would our ancestors think of this place today? I wonder if he's including the families from the Commonwealth who serve the empire. Yarvin is the son of a Protestant mother and a Jewish diplomat father, both staunch liberals. Last night, he was hanging out with Lord Maurice Glasman, recently described as Labour's mega lord, who Yarvin calls a charming fellow, and some other Jewish lords. I'm not really a Jew, he explains, but I'm Jewish enough for my haters. Then Yarvin starts telling a story about what happened this January as he was leaving an inauguration party at Butterworth's, a pro-Trump private members club in Washington, D.C. So I'm coming out and some groypers, internet Nazis, started to do that traditional anti-Semitic thing of throwing coins at me. Wow, I replied, genuinely shocked. Wow, right? What was really unfortunate, though, was that, I got delayed by talking to someone on the way out. So I was actually late for the Uber. And the thing is, I get the feeling he's building up to a punchline. I didn't have time to pick up the coins. Hiya, hiya, hiya. It's not the last anti-Semitic or racist joke that Yarvin, who has seriously argued for the existence of racial hierarchies, tells. I can't quite decide if he finds these jokes genuinely funny, but he seems compelled to make them. I point out the Kabul supermarket we're passing to our left. Oh yeah, so much for nation building, he offers a bit half-heartedly. The garden party is taking place the day after America has bombed 3 major nuclear sites in Iran, and I am keen to hear Yarvin's take. The strikes are the first big test of how the mega base will react to Trump going back on one of his major campaign promises. The machine will do what the machine does, Yarvin says wearily. He's pushed his glasses, practical, thin-framed, unstylish, up onto his forehead, where they remain for much of the day, and is sucking on a Werther's original proffered by my Bumble match. Trump has failed to break the frame of what's going on there. These things are based on established myths, and I'm just can't you just tear up this bullshit? Everything is just so performative. He starts talking about the Second World War, then Vietnam, the Jacobite Rising of 1745, Darth Vader, and how George Washington was just live-action role-playing during the American War of Independence. Is Trump LARPing? I ask. Is that your point? The whole American political system is LARPing. Everything is a LARP. He's living in the dream. Everybody's living in the dream. And a part of this dream is, if we bomb Iran, they'll have a revolution. Back in 2011, writing as Molebug, Yarvin described Trump as clearly biologically suited to being an American monarch, but he seems to have had a few changes of heart. Last year, he encouraged his readers to vote for Joe Biden before he dropped out of the race. Yarvin's worry at the time was that, by only bringing about a partial revolution, Trump could end up delaying the total revolution needed to usher in Yarvin's preferred regime. Earlier this year, though, he apologized for having been wrong about Trump 2.0. Now, Yarvin doesn't seem so sure again. I always want to bend over backwards if I may be wrong about something. And yeah, my prediction that the new Trump administration would be just like the old one was wrong. It's 10 times as energetic as the first Trump administration, he explains. But it's still 100 times less energetic than I would like. It's not even just a semi-revolution. It's a 1% revolution. Surely, I try to press. The revolution you want is therefore being hindered by Trump? Logically, objectively, you're absolutely right to say that. But I'm just not completely confident. A lot of people are getting a lot of experience, but that's also part of the problem. A lot of the techniques work best when they're being used for the first time. The car emerges from a grove of pine trees, and we pull up outside a dilapidated red brick manor house with peeling window frames and a large, sun-scorched lawn. We seem to have arrived. Norman McKenzie-Richmond, the house's owner, greets us. He is a tall, grinning Scottish man of about 50, dressed in a pair of mustard-colored palm print trousers, a white linen shirt, and a navy cap reading Team Brit. "Oh yes, the Financial Times," he says when I introduce myself. "I believe that's my friend Steve Bannon's favorite paper of record." Hiya. "We may have him on Skype later," McKenzie-Richmond adds. "It would make for an unlikely cameo." While Bannon and Yarvin are arguably the two most important intellects behind Trumpism and might seem ideologically aligned insofar as they are both radical right-wing thinkers deeply critical of the liberal establishment, they believe in starkly different remedies. While Bannon wants the masses to become more involved in politics, Yarvin wants to cut them out entirely. We walk into the garden, where about 20 people have gathered so far. A wooden-topped oval table with rusting metal legs has been laid out with a couple of cheese boards, 6 full-size bottles of Coca-Cola, cans of Inch's cider, and a bottle of orange juice. It isn't quite the spread I'd imagined. Yarvin is offered cider or some warm wine, both of which he declines. He'll wait for the Tatinger to chill. "Here come the Chads," he shouts as 2 blonde-haired, muscular brothers in their 20s wander over to meet him. There's a lot of Chad energy here. He's right. My Bumble match, tall, tatted, mildly Chaddish, seems to be friends with many of them, calling them his army of young men. But there is also a rather different energy here. A very online vibe emanates from the kind of guys you can imagine spending a lot of time playing video games in their parents' basements. My Bumble match doesn't seem to be friends with any of them, though. Is it because they're not Chads? "It's just serious versus unserious, really," he says. "The aesthetics are a big part of it." One of the non-Chads standing in the little group that has formed around Yarvin is wearing a t-shirt emblazoned with the name of the Nationalist Islander magazine and eating a piece of bread with 3 different types of cheese piled onto it. He introduces himself as a shit poster with a handle most people would recognize, though he doesn't disclose it. Another guy in the group explains he used to work for the self-loathing edgelord of the alt-right, Milo Yiannopoulos, at Breitbart. The authors of 2 well-known, rival UK-based right-wing substacks, Pimlico Journal and Jacques, are also here. One of them is ironically wearing a Keir Starmer t-shirt. As the ranks of party guests swell, to a peak of about 70 or 80 people, a few more women turn up, maybe a dozen or so. But men in their 20s and early 30s make up the bulk. Men between 40 and 60 comprise the second biggest group, about 80% of whom are wearing Skechers. A few people are wearing mega hats. This is, I'm told, a gathering of the dissident right, an anti-woke, anti-establishment, pro-nationalist segment of the right that considers itself more cutting-edge than mainstream conservatism. If you mention Nigel Farage or the Reform Party here, you get curled up faces. Far too moderate. It's close to what might have been called the alt-right, but that term feels a bit passé and much less relevant than during Trump's first campaign. Yarvin's ideas about replacing the democratic system with something akin to a dictatorship have given things a new twist, hence the need for new terminology. The dissident right is a cultural scene just as much as it is an intellectual movement. Its geographical capital is probably Dimes Square in Lower Manhattan, a micro-district of about 5 blocks jokingly named after a restaurant in the area. That became something of a transgressive hangout spot during COVID-19 lockdowns. Dimes Square is closely associated with the formerly left-wing, cool girl hosts of the satirical, post-ironic Red Scare podcast, Dasha Nekrasova and Anna Kachian, who Yarvin recently recorded a live show with, as well as with Sovereign House, a cultural event space tied to both Teal and Yarvin. That's the thing about this new scene. You don't have to be uncool to be right-wing anymore. Yarvin has perhaps not nailed the hipster aesthetic himself. Though his dress sense seems to have become less computer nerdish in recent years, perhaps thanks to his second wife, Christine Militello, whom he married in 2024 and describes as an art hoe. His one shoulder-length mop of bushy hair is cut to a more flattering length just below the ears. Today he's wearing a gray polka dot shirt, some straight-cut blue jeans, and a pair of brown Chelsea boots. He's also dropped 20 pounds thanks, first, to Ozempic, and now to some kind of experimental peptide that I haven't heard of. As Azealia Banks has said, when you're fat, you can say anything you want, and all people will hear is that you're fat. He says this a couple of times, though I can't find a record of the rapper turned online provocateur having said quite that. For a bunch of revolutionary right-wingers, the crowd doesn't seem that fussed about having a member of the globalist industrial complex around. I encountered none of the hostility I'd been warned about. At one point, though, I do overhear a few of the non-chads talking about me, so I turn around and ask, "What were you saying?" "Oh, we said nothing rude," one of them explains. "We were just saying that you're floating around like red balls in a sort of mini-clip game. Danger, danger. Keep away. There's a horrific white blood cell going to kill the bacteria." They all laugh. I look at them blankly. The reference, as one of them points out, isn't landing. She's so not one of us. I wander into the house and through to a large, ramshackle kitchen with exposed beams, stone floors, and an old wood burner. I'm trying to find out where my champagne has got to and whether it's cold enough to drink yet. A goateed bald man in his late 50s, wearing a white kaftan and white-framed sunglasses, is standing at the table slicing a loaf of bread for another cheese board. The man introduces himself as Matthew Glamorre, the main organizer of today's party, and asks me if I'm here to do a hit job. I try to be honest, telling him I've come with an open mind, but am likely to have some differences in opinion with other guests, as I don't consider myself to be on the right. "No, neither do I," Glamour says. I'm slightly surprised that the organizer of a dissident right gathering, thrown in honor of one of the most famous right-wing thinkers on the planet, doesn't consider himself to be right-wing. Do you not? Well, I do now, but only because they're kind of my community. Did you become alienated from your previous one? Oh, darling, I was canceled in 97. Before then, Glamour was a well-known figure in London's underground club scene, organizing parties, making music videos, and performing. He went wherever the counterculture did. In the 1980s, it was acid house, then grunge. In the early 1990s, he opened a club called Smashing in the West, and that became the epicenter of the emerging Britpop scene. Jarvis Cocker DJ'd there, and his band, Pulp, filmed the music video for Disco 2000 on the club's dance floor. Glamour worked with a host of other art and music A-listers, Damien Hirst, Kurt Cobain, Oasis, Blur. They all canceled me. Everyone did. Bye. He waves his hand. It was a lonely 20 years. But I've never been so popular. He pops a grape into his mouth, his just dessert. Then he tells me what led to his social ostracism. During a planning meeting for the 1997 Brighton Gay Pride Parade, Glamour pitched an idea that didn't go down well. They wanted me to do a float because they wanted something edgy, he recalls, pulling a face. So I said we should have an open-top bus, rainbow bus of course, with gay down the side of it and 50 people in rainbow Ku Klux Klan outfits waving from the top. Like gay, instead of KKK. Glamour says this wasn't just provocation. He felt that corporations and public institutions seemed to suddenly be draping themselves in rainbow colors, pinkwashing, after 15 years of ignoring or denying the crisis of the AIDS epidemic. This hypocrisy repulsed him. I said, surely I'm not the only one that every time when I see a rainbow flag, I see a swastika. I was like, this is fascism or a form of it. One of the other organizers suggested it was time for Glamour to leave. I said, why? And she says, you're making us feel unsafe. It was the first time I'd heard that word, Glamour recalls, as he spreads a wad of camembert onto a slice of bread. After a lonely couple of decades, Glamour seems to have successfully ridden a countercultural wave back to relevance. He is now one of the main social organizers for the London scene of the dissident right. Along with Sovereign House, he threw the unofficial after-party for this year's art conference, London's right-wing Davos, and puts on smaller events every month or so. The DJ walks into the kitchen looking a bit exhausted. The music she's been playing so far hasn't quite got the garden party crowd going as she'd like. Can I play some sort of Ibiza-wise sort of stuff? She asks Glamour. No, absolutely not. Something with a beat? Glamour has just stuffed the camembert into his mouth. No. No. Absolutely not. Are you sure they want to listen to medieval music all day? Glamour has instructed her to play mainly barcore, a micro-genre that he describes as covers of famous music done in the medieval style that, like the dissident right itself, really picked up momentum in 2020. The DJ explains to me that the idea is that this is the kind of music our ancestors would have sung, so they kind of trigger something in your DNA. The ethno-nationalists at the party don't seem that moved. Glamour met Yarvin 3 years ago at Skidelsky, a UK-based far-right conference modeled on the early medieval Anglo-Saxon Witan, or King's Council. The two struck up a friendship that inspired Glamour to launch the Cathedral, the name under which he hosts all his parties. A year later, he officiated Yarvin's second wedding in Berkeley, California. I'm beginning to realize that in some ways, this is a coming together of the formerly canceled. I meet people here who have lost jobs, lost appearances on GB News, who have been kicked out of the Tory party and even from the British National Party. The dissident right seems to provide a haven where nothing you say can get you kicked out of the gang, as long as you're loyal to the gang. When I have sourced both the Cold Enough Tatinger and Yarvin, we try to find appropriate glasses. I settle for a pint glass, allowing Yarvin the stemmed wine glass. He takes the champagne bottle by the neck and begins to pour at a vertical angle, so I grab it away from him before his glass overflows with froth. Okay, he says, show me how a real English girl with class pours champagne. I demonstrate how to hold the bottle at the base and pour at a 45-degree angle, as he tells me about the way his ex-fiancée broke up with him when she was pregnant with his child. She dumped me and threatened to get a restraining order if I tried to contact her again. But the real problem is that she dumped me right after I'd taken a tab of acid. Yarvin seems to be a fairly regular casual drug user. He mentions ketamine too. We top up our glasses and go back outside, where a young man approaches me. Are you enjoying your time? Got some nice dirt on the horrible right-wingers. His name is Callum Barker, and he's from the Homeland Party, a fringe nationalist party founded in 2023 that Hope Not Hate, an advocacy group, describes as the largest fascist organization in the UK. Next to him is Homeland's national media officer Alec Cave, who was sacked from his job at the Open University after he tweeted, "Why does a person who speaks and acts like a foreigner expect to be treated the same as an Englishman in England?" to the British actor John Boyega. He sued his former employers for discrimination, but lost the case. I asked Cave how he fits into the dissident right. I wouldn't label myself as reactionary, but obviously I am completely against liberal ideology, he says. Would you say you're a liberal? Oh yeah. Classical liberalism was the start of all of this. He begins telling me about how America's biggest problem is decades of mass immigration. I point out that the U.S. is, a nation of immigrants, to which he responds, it was originally founded by people of Northwest European ancestry. I note there were people there before them. There were Native Americans, and they lost out, he replies. Sucks for them. This is an odd comment from the spokesperson of a party claiming one of its key beliefs to be that indigenous people have an inseparable bond with their homeland and are its natural stewards to make. The Homeland lads escort me over to a squat, bald man standing near the barbecue. He is drinking a can of amber ale and has another tucked into his pocket. This is Kenny Smith, Homeland Party leader, who was previously thrown out of the far-right British National Party. So you're from the FT? When did they start covering nationalist picnics? Smith, who is from the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, takes me on a tour of his various arm tattoos, the Calonized Stones, the Lewis Chessmen, a map of the island. Trump's mother came from there, he points to one side of the tattoo, and I lived there, the other, so we were across Broad Bay from one another. His soft, lilting Scottish Islander accent and his generally round shape give him a teddy bearish quality, which he seems keen to convey. We're doing sensible nationalism, Smith maintains, but we are fighting for our homeland to be the ethnic homeland of our people. A nation can only tolerate a small minority of people who aren't indigenous. His tone gets less cuddly as he continues. We have to have remigration, 100%. That is the USP of the Homeland Party. We will deport the illegals, the criminals, and the subversives. After that, it has to be voluntary. We will incentivize people to remigrate. Smith believes white, ethnic Britons should make up 95% of the population, about 20 percentage points more than they do currently. Can I just say, interrupts a man named Jack in a thick Essex accent. He says he is one of Homeland's regional organizers. I come from a very multicultural area, and a lot of ethnics around where I live. When they get older, a lot of them want to go back to India or the Caribbean. That's their dream. So it's not even that far-fetched. Cave turns to me. So what's your skill then? Spinning stuff into a story? No, I reply. My skill is keeping a straight face when someone tells me something, and inside I'm thinking, fucking hell. Norman McKenzie-Richmond, the home's owner, has swapped his blue cap for a red Mega 1. He's on the mic, asking everybody to gather round. His friend, he tells us, is a composer who has written a special song for Yarvin. He plays it for us. Let the cathedral fall, he won't believe it all. He built a patchwork dream far outside the main. Stream later, I asked McKenzie-Richmond, who is also the chair of Ofcom Watch, dedicated to criticizing the UK government's broadcasting authority, if he can send me a copy. He forwards a link on Suno, an AI platform that allows users to generate their own songs. The prompt used to create the track reads, guitar, UK folk, male vocals. Well, thank you, Yarvin says when the song finishes. I don't know whether to find it sweet or cringe, or maybe both. But I think it must qualify as the first dissident right narco corrido. That's a form of ballad that they sing about drug traffickers in northern Mexico, in pretty much exactly the same spirit. As Yarvin launches into a rambling candé, I scuttle away to talk to some more people. The crowd is predominantly, but not exclusively, white. There are a few Asian men, and there's also a tall, mixed-race man, aged about 30, who is filming some of the day's proceedings. His name is William Coleshill, a former Tory councillor who was expelled from the party after being accused of racism and conspiracy theorizing. He now runs Resistance GB, originally an anti-vaccine, anti-lockdown platform that now seems more broadly new rightish. It has 115,000 followers on YouTube. I asked Coleshill how he defines his political stance. He's a liberal, he says. I tell him some of the people I've spoken to today call themselves a liberal. Those people need to find a dictionary. We're on the same side. They're just not literate. Throughout the day, I noticed there's been a lot of talk about our side of the argument, our side of the right, but it isn't always quite clear what that means. The party seems to be split into a number of subgroups. The Chads, very online non-Chads, Homeland Party guys, pure Yarvin stans, influencers, right-wing art boys, tagalongs, and randoms. There are apparently even people from the Labour Party, I'm told, but I never come across any. At one point, my Bumble match estimates the party is 60% retards, using a term the dissident right has enthusiastically reclaimed. A few other common themes come up. One is Smith's question about what proportion of Britain should be white British. Another is whether women should have the vote. Grooming gangs, social housing, and liberal elites are all hot topics. There is a victimhood Olympics playing out under many of these conversations in the same way one finds in progressive circles, though in this case it is the straight, white, patriotic, British male winning the bronze, silver, and gold. Coleshill would probably dispute this characterization. When I tell him that I think many people here are white nationalists, he says, not really. What you'll find is people who believe you have to have British ancestry to be British, and I agree. I ask him what his ancestry is. English, Welsh, and my father's from the West Indies, but I've never met the bloke, he replies. I've got the blood of Alfred in my veins. I've got the blood of Arthur in my veins. Do you ever encounter any racism at these gatherings? No, unless it's a joke. And the taboo jokes are always the funniest. Just before 10 p.m., McKenzie-Richmond tells everyone who's still here that it's time to leave. The DJ has taken a train home already, So a socialist blogger who seems to know a lot of people in the crowd takes her seat in the Porsche for the journey back. As we drive, we realize we're all a bit hungry, so we decide on a curry. But by now, it's coming up to 11 on a Sunday night, and we're struggling to find anything that's open. Finally, I locate a place in Thornton Heath, back in the UK, that has a 4.5-star rating on Google. As we pull up, my Bumble match spots a Muslim man praying the Salah on a nearby patch of grass. "Oh my God," he says. "It's too perfect." Inside the Halwapuri house, the wall behind our table is decorated with fairy lights, various neon signs, a Pakistani flag, and a Union Jack with the word London across it. On the opposite wall are laminated photos of various mosques in Pakistan, as well as some letters from the Quran. "You don't understand how perfect this is," my Bumble match continues. "This, right now, is the best argument that we live in a simulation." Yarvin wants a beer, but as alcohol isn't served, he goes for a mango lassi instead. He asks for a lamb korma, but there's only chicken korma. So he goes for that and asks for some parathas too. He seems to know his way around a curry house. As Yarvin stresses the need for the dismantling of institutions and for a full regime change in between sucking on his straw, I consider who, or what, it is that this revolutionary dissident right is really dissenting from. When people at the party talked about our side of the argument, it was less the radical woke left they seemed to be trying to differentiate themselves from, and more the moderate right. Or, as my Bumble match put it at one point, the worst people here are the secret Tory boys. But the underlying sentiment isn't the grievance at being excluded that animated the alt-right. It's the decadence of those that know they are in the cultural ascendancy. That's the real difference between this new dissident right and what came before. The pervasive feeling that they are winning the argument. They are also operating on a different scale. While the alt-right largely came about as a reaction to the excesses of a relatively small group of social justice warriors, the dissident right has sprung up in the aftermath of the massive social experiments of 2020 to 21. Enforced mass lockdowns, enforced vaccination, enforced white guilt. They might talk about the secret Tory boys as the enemy, but the fact is that the secret Tory boys are at their parties listening to their ideas and drinking their warm cider. This leaves me feeling that the right has the advantage of being much more united than the left. When we finally say goodbye, Yarvin gives me a warm hug. Shortly after, he texts asking me not to mention a salacious story he told about a celebrity. My philosophy, he writes, is that the relationship of a source to a journalist should be long-term and not a quick, cheap bang. A few moments later, he follows with, "I don't want to have to use a condom." Metaphorically speaking, the next morning, a text comes through from my Bumble match. It reads, "Layer 2, well done." Written by Jemima Kelly, August 2025.